Hi everybody, today we're doing another series of portraits, but I promise you, next week we are going to have a different theme, okay? But the reason we are doing this for yet another week is because I want to reinforce something I often say. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. So today we are going to be doing something similar to what we did last week, but this time we will be focusing entirely on watercolors. However, we're going to subvert the traditional approach. Instead of keeping them light and delicate, we'll make them bold, dense, and expressive, and treat watercolors the same way we do with acrylics, gouache, or even oil paint. So we'll start our compositions using watercolor pencils, then we activate the pigment with water, and after that, we'll add contrast and depth using traditional watercolor in specific areas of the painting, okay? So, if you've been following along, you've probably heard me say thousands of times already that even if your drawing skills still feel limited or far from your own expectations, there are many, many, many ways to make your art interesting. You can add texture, experiment with colors, play with proportions, and bring intentionality into your compositions. And those are all it takes to add interest and visual appeal to your compositions. So let's recap some of the things that I have been saying over and over and over in these exercises. You are good enough. I don't know you personally. It's quite possible that I have never seen you and that I don't know you, but I can tell with absolute certainty you are good enough. And I don't just mean your art, I mean you. Because every creative journey starts with a small, brave decision to show up despite the fear that you're not ready, not skilled enough, not talented enough. But here's the truth, that fear never really goes away. You just learn to move with it and stop letting it decide what you're capable of. So let go of fear. Fear is that awareness of our environment, our surroundings, and it is also part of our collective instinct. When we are home alone, we don't really care what we wear or if we wear anything at all, because anything comfortable will do. But the moment you know you'll be seen, you become self aware because you're no longer dressing just for yourself, but for the eyes that might notice you, even if your intention is to stay invisible. It is the same thing with dancing to the radio or singing in the shower when no one's around. We do it freely without a second thought. It's basic instinct. We do it freely without a second thought because it happens naturally. But the moment we imagine that someone is watching or listening, we hesitate, we shrink, we feel embarrassed. It is funny, isn't it? Because it is as natural as going to the bathroom. Everyone does it, everyone knows everyone does it, and yet somehow we still feel the need to keep it to ourselves. Not the best thing to compare it to, but you understand what I'm trying to say, right? What I mean is, your home looks different when you have guests. You behave differently when you're in public. It's all part of a deeply human instinct to fit in, to belong, because fitting in, belonging makes us feel safe. And that same instinct shows up when we are expressing ourselves, be it with our words, with our work, and of course, with our art. It is that little voice that whispers, what if it looks terrible? Or what if nobody likes what I'm doing? But here's the truth, fear has one job: to keep you safe. And sometimes keeping you safe will also mean not to let you explore and not to let you grow. So when you paint, draw, or mostly do anything beyond the norm, fear will always tell you, don't. Your job is to say, I will anyway. You don't need confidence to begin. You need curiosity, because confidence isn't something you start with. It is something you build by facing what scares you again and again and again and again until it becomes just a little less scary each time. The second thing is stop comparing your work. It's a common thing that we often hear that the fastest way to lose joy in your art is to compare it to someone else's. Because when we look at endless perfect paintings or drawings or whatever art you're looking at, it is easy to forget that those artists have been through hundreds, sometimes thousands, of terrible sketches and bad days. What you're seeing is their highlighted accomplishments, and you cannot compare that to your behind the scenes. Those two will never match up. Your art doesn't need to look like anyone else's to be good. It just needs to look yours. The third thing is stop imitating other artists. It is okay to be inspired by other artists. In fact, it is necessary. But when we start copying instead of learning, we lose the very thing that makes art powerful: your own voice. I assume you can borrow techniques, study colors, learn brushwork, but let it filter through you, because the goal isn't to be the next Da Vinci or the next Picasso, the next Van Gogh. The goal is to be the first you. Another thing that I often say is that you should understand your own abilities. Every artist has strengths and weaknesses. And the trick isn't to get rid of them, but to work with them. Maybe you're great at color but struggle with composition, or maybe your lines aren't straight but they are expressive. So instead of hiding what you're not, try to embrace what you are, because some of the most beloved art in the world exists because an artist leaned into their works. Your so-called limitations might actually be your very own signature. Another thing that I would like to say once again is grow through practice, not perfection. You don't need to know enough to start making art. You start to learn enough by making art. Waiting until you feel ready is just fear in disguise. Every painting you dare to make teaches you. You learn more from every painting you dare to make than from any tutorial or class that you attempt to. So if you want to make art, start now with the skills that you have, the tools that you have, and the courage that you have today. Because mastery doesn't come before making, it comes from making. And understand that not everyone will like your art, and that's fine, and that's okay. Here's another truth: you don't like every painting you see, do you? And that's completely fine by you, isn't it? because art is subjective, okay? It connects with people in different ways. And sometimes your work just won't be someone else's taste, and that's absolutely okay. That doesn't mean your art is bad. And it also doesn't mean that if someone doesn't like your art, they don't like you. These are two very different things, and yet most people fail for that. Your art is part of you, but not necessarily something that will define who you are. Okay? So please learn to separate your worth from your work and stop seeking for validation. When we start looking for approval, for likes, for praise, for validation, we begin painting for other people instead of ourselves. And the moment it happens, the joy of creation starts to fade. Make art that feels like breathing. Make it because it helps you understand yourself or the world, or just gives you peace, even if for just a few moments. Your art doesn't need to impress anyone, it just needs to express you, to express who you are. And just another thing before we finish, every brush stroke you make is a conversation with yourself. Some days it will be messy and confusing, other days it will be magical, and no matter what, it is yours. And that's something no one else can create. Your art is something that only you can create. So the next time you sit down to paint, remember, you're not trying to prove anything. You're simply showing up as you are and letting your art say what your words cannot. Okay? So now go make something. It doesn't have to be beautiful, it doesn't have to be perfect, because beautiful doesn't exist, perfect neither. Okay? And remember, if you're still waiting to be good enough to start, just know that you'll only get good by practicing, by learning your own way of translating your feelings into the canvas. As artists, it's in our nature to stay curious, to stay adventurous, and to always want more. But that doesn't mean you have to wait until you're ready, because ready doesn't really exist. And that's it. These are the results of what we've done today. I hope you've learned something new today. Now go and make something. It doesn't have to be beautiful, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be honest. It just needs to be you. As always, keep on practicing, and thank you for joining us.